Let me begin by saying good afternoon. Thank you, Ms. Joe, for once again making time in your busy schedule to be able to address, to continue our webinar from Wednesday, to be able to address questions. Obviously, we had a ton we was able to address during that webinar, but we have a ton more that we're going to be able to, and that's what this session is strictly for.
Okay.
I want to thank everyone who's attending now. Once again, we know these are some challenging times, but we're going to continue to stay positive, continue to believe, and keep fighting till we get through this time. And it's good to have representatives like Ms. Joe, who is taking time out of her day to make it a point to help you all through this time. And I find it as a privilege and honor as myself to be on that platform with her. So with that being said, so that we can spend most of our time addressing these questions, I'm gonna go ahead and get started.
Okay.
So we can go ahead and start flowing. So some of the questions that we, let me say this as far as a little housekeeping also. We will be getting a PowerPoint presentation from Ms. Joe's previous webinar to you all. I'm gonna see about getting the actual recording edited so we can make sure we're focusing on the actual, so we can get all of the anything out of it that doesn't need to be there as far as unnecessary space and whatnot, because sometimes everybody's computer can't hold all the large capacity. So we want to make sure we do that properly, as well as the questions. Obviously, we have well over 100 questions, ladies and gentlemen, so we're hoping to get through as many as we can. If there's any that we do not get to, we'll try our best to address those in written form at a later date. Obviously, we'll need you to be patient with us because Ms. Joe, in addition to this webinar, has probably she probably averages 2 webinars a day, folks. So we definitely appreciate her being here. But that also means it takes preparation for those. So she will address them accordingly as well, and I'll be assisting with that. So without further ado, we have Ms. Joanne Lawrence once again with us. She's the Deputy District Director for the Louisiana District Office, the SBA Louisiana District Office. And we have the pleasure of her being able to address the questions that we have. So I'll start off with this question. This individual says, I am a sole proprietorship and received a PPP loan already. How do I make sure that I keep my records currently on how I utilize the PPP for a self-employed sole proprietorship?
Okay, so one of the things we have been encouraging everyone to do is, if it was possible for them to set up a separate bank account for the PPP, then that way they would only use that account to pay the allowable expenses as well as the allowable salaries. However, if that person is not able to do that or is unwilling to do that, then it will be important for them to track those expenses that they use the funds for. Just keeping in mind that you can only use the PPP money for mortgage interest payments, rent or lease, and utilities, and to meet payroll. So if, as a sole proprietor, you included in your application that amount of income that you have, which would have been determined by what was on the Schedule C, then you would need to ensure that what you're paying yourself on an annualized basis equals to that amount that you had on your Schedule C for your personal salary if you did not run it through payroll. So document is going to be the key for tracking the use of proceeds on those PPPs. We are still awaiting guidance on exactly what you need to submit to the lender to request forgiveness And as that information becomes available, of course, we will share it with the general public. But for right now, the key is document, document, document.
Okay. So if I was able to elaborate on their question a bit more, because they did give some examples, but so would you say the canceled checks, receipts, account statements, and other documentation, is that what you would say?
Yes.
As far as document, keeping those things readily available, accessible, and up to date.
Right, and the bank records, yes.
Okay, good. Because you had already mentioned on the Schedule C, and they also had kind of mentioned that in their statement. So next question, or did you want to say something else, Ms. Jo?
No, just for
Okay.
the Schedule C, in order for them to request forgiveness of that portion, they must have included that on their Schedule C, those expenses.
Yes, ma'am. So next question, will it be acceptable to pay staffing company as part of working capital? They say because we deal with a staffing company, that this keeps us from being eligible to apply for the PPP.
Okay, so with those staffing companies and those other individuals who use professional employee organizations, what determines your eligibility, that's determined by how you handle that payroll. And in our frequently asked questions, we specifically address that. So you would have to be able to demonstrate that you actually ran that payroll through your company's organization. If you did not, then that's what's making you ineligible for the PPP.
Okay. When does the time begin for restaurants/business receiving PPP loans that remain closed due to government regulations?
The time to return the employees to payroll is on the date that you receive your PPP funds, regardless of whether or not the established is open. You have to return the employees to payroll on the date that you receive your PPP funds.
Okay. Some clients are getting 1,000 to 10,000 auto deposit in bank account. Description of this has idle. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. You can finish. No, you can finish.
Description of this has idle and EIDL. Please clarify what this description means. Also, are these required to be paid back, or are they automatically forgiven?
Okay, so that automatic deposit that you're getting without any notice is your idle advance, and that idle advance is subject to be forgiven. So one of the things that's happening with the idle advance is that to speed up the process and to get the funds to the borrowers as quickly as possible, the agency is just depositing the money into the account that's included on the application. So you won't get any notice on that, but that's what that is. That's the idle advance, and it is subject to be forgiven.
Okay. If SBA has done a credit check, what is the estimated processing time?
So with the credit check, we're estimating, and please keep in mind that this is just an approximate, 3 to 4 weeks before you will receive the email from the SBA loan officer that's going to contain the link for you to create your economic injury disaster loan portal. And that portal, and we did have that up on our screen when we did the PowerPoint presentation, that portal is actually going to ask you to create an account. And as a part of that, you will be requested to verify your identity. Once you verify your identity, then the next thing that will happen, you will see an amount determined. And I would like for everyone to understand that on the EIDL process, the amount determined is not the amount approved. Because what you'll notice is that to the right is going to give a status of your application. And if it says still in processing, that means that that amount determined is not actually the amount approved. The other thing that will take place in your personal portal is going to be your completing the closing documents. So I'm saying give us, approximately 3 to 4 weeks before you will hear something from the loan officer after your credit is pulled.
Okay. Now, how is the loan amount determined? I don't recall that being a question on the application process.
Okay, no, for the EIDL, there is no place for you to input a loan amount. The amount is determined by what you include for your cost of goods. So I'm sorry, for your total gross revenues for the past year and your cost of goods sold. And from that information, the loan officer that's processing and your application will determine what your working capital needs would be. So that's how that amount is determined.
Okay. Real quick little sidebar. Folks, we see that we are getting questions in via the webinar right now through the question aspect and also in the chat.
Okay.
We will address those. However, I'm going through, we had a ton of questions that were from the previous webinar as well as submitted in. So we're just going kind of in that fashion, but we'll get to those questions as well that's being sent in. So I just wanted to make sure for all viewers, we do see you all sending in the questions. So I'm gonna go with the next one. Ms. Joy says, when should we submit all supporting documents if our application began with a 3?
Okay, so if your confirmation number begins with a 3, once you get the request from the SBA loan officer, and we want you to make sure that it comes from an SBA.gov email address. Okay, once you get that request to create your personal portal, when the request for you to submit the closing documents, that's going to come via that portal. So it's only after the loan officer communicates with you and asks that you submit any additional information or complete your closing documents. So there's nothing that you need to do right now, except we're requesting patience as we work through the applications that we've received.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking for next question. I'm looking for the written rules that I have heard on webinars, including that no employee can be paid less than 75% of their pay, even if they won't work. I understand there are 5 rules. Can you send us the link to find these 5 rules?
Okay, there's more than 5 rules. However, it's not that no employee can be paid less than 75%. You have to pay the employee 100% of whatever their salary or wage would normally be. And that includes whatever amount they would have earned from tips. Okay, if you're in a business where you pay your employees tips, the 75% applies to the portion of the PPP that has to go toward payroll. Because when you applied for your PPP, you included an amount for payroll, and you also checked that a portion of it would be used to pay expenses, utilities, or mortgage interest. However, whatever that total amount of that loan is, no less than 75% of that has to go to payroll, but your employees must be paid at their full salary or wage, because that's what's used to determine the amount of the loan. Now, all of the rules and the frequently asked questions are posted on our website under the Paycheck Protection Program link, and they are also posted on the Treasury's website. So like I said, it's more than just 5 rules. We're already up to 45 frequently asked questions, but the interim final rules, okay, which is where we're up to 8 now, where we cover all aspects of the PPP, are also included on our Paycheck Protection website and on the Treasury's website.
Great. Next question. Can you confirm that the EIDL advance labeled as an EIDL is truly a grant and is not expected to be paid back by the borrower? And can the borrower keep the EIDL even if the borrower declines the loan?
Okay, so with the EIDL advance, okay, it is subject to be forgiven. And the reason I'm using the terminology subject to be forgiven is because if you get the EIDL advance and you also get the PPP, the amount of the EIDL advance has to be deducted from the PPP, because there can be no duplication of benefits. Okay, so if you get the EIDL advance and you determine that that's sufficient for your needs, there is no obligation to accept the full EIDL. So, you know, you're not under any obligation to take a loan.
If a company receives $200,000 loan and files for bankruptcy 2 years later, is the debt discharged and is any owner on the hook?
The debt is not discharged. What will happen is it will be turned over to Treasury. And that means that any amounts that would be due you coming from the federal government will be attached by the Department of Treasury. Same thing happens like if you default on anything, it's not discharged. It's still held on the books, and the amount is turned over to Treasury for Treasury offset. So that means that that could affect any SSI payments, Social Security, income tax refunds, things like the stimulus that's going out. All of that would be affected because it's all federal money. So filing bankruptcy does not get the individual off the hook. There was a second part to that question. What was it?
That you answered it just now. So, and is
okay.
Any owner on the hook? So yeah, you just answered it.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yes, you are. Okay.
If we receive an acknowledgement that SBA is reviewing our application, how long after that email should we expect a decision?
We're estimating approximately 3 to 4 weeks.
Okay, we're gonna go to the next one. While we wait for approval of the EIDL advance, should we go ahead and send in the SBA forms?
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, go ahead, finish.
I am looking at SBA Form 5C, Form 5, Form 1368, Form 413D, Form 4506-T, Form 2202 on the paper forms page of sba.gov/disaster. If we complete these and send these in before we receive, would that create confusion or any problems? Or should we just wait before sending these forms in?
You should wait before sending those forms in. And you only want to send those if you're requested to do so, because when we developed that streamlined application, that was to keep you from having to send in that additional information. So those forms will not be necessary for you to submit. If you have an application confirmation number that begins with a 3, there is nothing else that you need to do right now except to wait to hear from the loan officer when you get that email asking you to create your portal and to verify your identity. So no, please don't send those forms in. And you're right, it will only create confusion.
When will SBA provide clarity and details regarding forgiveness under the PPP loan? We understand that there was supposed to be an interim final rule on 4/26/2020.
Okay, we're still developing the guidance on how to request the forgiveness, and that's still information that we need to get to the lenders. We have several interim final rules that have been posted since April 24th, and they are all posted on the SBA's disaster website for the Paycheck Protection Program, and they are also posted on the Treasury's website. So there are a number of interim final rules that have been posted. There are those that have been posted dealing with affiliation, something for hospitals, something for faith-based organizations. So we're constantly developing additional guidance, but we have not developed the guidance for requesting the forgiveness. That is forthcoming.
Okay. I recently noticed a deposit in my bank account which notes that it is EIDG. Is this the economic injury money? If so,
yes,
is this
yes,
a one?
it is.
Go ahead.
Yes, it is.
And is this a one-time deposit, or will there be additional deposits? And it asks, is this a loan or a grant? And if it is a loan, when will I receive paperwork on the repayment of this?
Okay, so if it's the economic injury disaster loan advance, you will not receive any paperwork regarding repayment of that advance. We cannot use the term grant, because that's why we're calling it an economic injury disaster loan advance. Okay, we cannot use the term grant because SBA does not have the authority to offer grants to small business owners. That's why you hear me say that it is subject to be forgiven. And I use the terminology subject because to be forgiven, because if you apply for a PPP, that amount is deducted from the amount that's forgiven on the PPP because it will be a duplication of benefits. So you will not hear me say grant because SBA does not offer grants. However, that amount that you receive for the EIDL advance does not have to be repaid.
So the EIDL advances, I'm assuming, is what when they're saying the EIDG.
Yes.
On any. Okay, gotcha.
Yes.
And this question, I'm sure you may have mentioned it earlier or even during the webinar.
Okay.
But I'm going to ask them anyway. It says, can you have both EIDL and PPP loans?
Yes, you can.
Okay. Well, I apologize, y'all. Give me a. Okay, we go. If you receive up to $10,000 advance on your EIDL loan, does that mean you are in the pipeline with with no further action required until contacted by SBA.
That's correct.
Where can I get information on an application starting with a number 3?
Right now, we do not have a portal set up where you can check the status of an application. So unfortunately, we have no way of getting that information to you regarding the status of your application. Just the assurance that it's there and we are going to process the application.
Has the original $10,000 grant from the EIDL now been capped to $1,000 per employee up to $10,000?
Okay, so the EIDL advance was always up to $10,000 and it was always based upon the number of employees. So if you're a sole proprietor with no other employees, then that means that your EIDL advance is going to be $1,000.
Okay. If you are not sure you completed page 2 of 2, where to send funds, should that page be completed and sent without an SBA officer requesting it?
I'm not sure what page 2 of 2 is, because with the new electronic application in section 4 of that application, that's where the applicants were required to put in their banking information and where they wanted the account to be, the money to be sent. So I'm not familiar with what page 2 of 2 is, because that's not a part of the new EIDL electronic application. They'll need to clarify that.
Okay. If you get the invite to the EIDL portal and you no longer need it because you received the PPP, what should you say? Also, if you haven't gotten the EIDL advance yet, can it still be processed with or without a PPP loan?
Yes, the EIDL advance can still be processed. So on that piece where they receive the notice to go in and set up their portal, on that one, I'm going to have to make a note to check with the Office of Disaster Assistance to see if there's an option in there to say I no longer want the loan. I know after the loan is processed and it's approved, you have the option of saying I'm not interested in the loan anymore. But if you know beforehand that you no longer are interested, I'll just have to see what you need to do.
Okay. Are you knowledgeable if SBA will open the application period a third time after monies are returned from firms that should not have received monies?
Okay, so the only portal with which SBA is dealing is the EIDL portal. Okay, so as far as we know, there are no individuals that have been approved for those loans, because the underwriting for those loans is completely different than that for the PPP. So that's why it takes a little longer to process the EIDLs, because we're looking at every aspect of that applicant to ensure that they are eligible. So for right now, as far as we know, there are no funds that are going to be returned to the EIDL program. The only funds that are being returned is for the PPP program. And we still have about $100 billion available to be loaned under the PPP program.
Okay. This one is pretty lengthy, but I guess,
Okay.
to get a full understanding of what their question is.
Okay.
It says, also, regarding the EIDL loan, I applied for that as well. I applied during the phase when you upload the SBA Form 5C online, when the advanced opportunity opened. And so I applied for that online. I did receive an advance of $1,000, as I am one person, sole proprietorship, and I got an email that my application is being reviewed and will be contacted in the order it was received. I was in the middle of diversifying my business to include a sustainable farming operations, which I started before January 31st. How do I handle that, as my application does not begin with a number 2?
Okay, so the only way to submit another application for that farming operation would be if it had a different employee identification number. If not, there's no way to submit another application for the same entity.
Is there an anticipated date when EIDL will open back up for everyone?
So that was a question we had yesterday, and we have not gotten a definitive answer on that yet. The reason for that is we have to make sure that we're not obligating the government beyond the appropriations that we have. So unfortunately, right now, we just don't know when it'll be opened up again for everyone.
After approval, how soon will funds be deposited?
As soon as the closing documents are completed, then the funds will be deposited. Because we're not involved at that level in terms of the closing documents being processed, we have no way of knowing that. But we do know it cannot be done until after the closing documents are completed on the EIDL.
Are churches eligible for EIDL, and must they have filed their tax return?
Yes, churches are eligible for EIDLs, and for the EIDLs, the only tax returns that we would be requesting would be for 2018. We're not requesting tax returns for 2019, only 2018.
I'll probably have to send this one out. They say, can we please provide the application website again?
Okay. It's COVID-19 relief. Let me bring it up. I can type it in chat. Yeah. Let me bring it up, and I will type it in chat. So
okay.
Yeah. You can go on to the next question.
Okay, they said I received the $1,200, and then they asked, can I apply for the loan advance?
Okay, so I'm not sure what $1,200 is.
They might be mentioning the stimulus.
It could, yeah, it could be, because for the EIDL, okay, it's going to be in round numbers. So it's either going to be 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, or something like that. So that $1,200, if it is the stimulus, that has nothing to do with the funding opportunities that's available from SBA.
Okay. Applicants that receive PPP loans must apply for forgiveness of the loan 7 weeks from the date of loan or origination date. What is the address to submit the request for forgiveness?
So it's after the end of the 7th week, they can submit their request for forgiveness. It will be sent to the lender who made the loan.
How can we check the status if we are in line?
If it's for EIDL, unfortunately, we do not have a way for them to check the status of their application.
Can one apply now for the EIDL advance and not the loan, even though they are not an agricultural business?
No, they cannot. The portal is only open for the agricultural businesses and those individuals who have only a confirmation number that begins with a 2. Anyone else who applies will get a message from SBA, an email telling them that their application cannot be accepted at this time. So we just have to wait to see if they're going to be able to have sufficient funding to open up the portal again to allow all applicants to apply for an EIDL or an EIDL advance.
Okay. I have been informed by my state SBA that I have been approved for PPP and have a loan number. I have been unable to get the lender to answer my phone calls or emails. What should I do?
Okay, I'm not sure who would have informed them that they were approved for PPP, because that comes from the lender. And when they approve you, they're the ones who will reach out to you regarding completing the closing documents and notifying you when your deposit will take place. Because on the PPPs, SBA is not involved in that processing and approval process. So you need to work with the lender to whom you submitted that application.
I received an email from my bank about the SBA guaranteed loan, saying that I do not have to pay the loan for 6 months. I am not set up on auto pay. I make the payments. So do I continue to make the payments since I was allowed to make April 2020 payment?
Okay, so if this is a borrower who already has an existing SBA loan, they have the option of continuing to make those payments. It's really up to them if they want to do that. But that's a part of the debt relief that SBA has in place for our existing borrowers, where we're actually going to cover the payments for them. So for this individual, if they choose to continue to make the payments, then they need to make sure that they let the lender know that they do want that applied to their loan beyond what SBA is going to pay.
Okay. When will the final rule regarding forgiveness be made public?
We have not finished developing all of the guidance on the forgiveness of the PPPs. We are still working on that guidance. It has not been developed yet.
I have an app number with 3, but mailed the paper application in. How will they be synced together?
What's going to happen is that paper application, depending on the name of the business and the EIN, that's going to have to be done manually by the SBA processing center in Fort Worth. So it's going to involve a manual process. However, you may receive something from the electronic application even before that takes place.
I am not an agricultural business. Can I send in my application and get in the queue for the loan advance?
No, you cannot. It's only open to agricultural businesses and those individuals who had applied previously and have a confirmation number that begins with a 2.
We are a 501c3. What loans can I apply for?
Either the EIDL or the PPP.
Okay. How does the injury loan amount get determined? Because I have not yet submitted Form 1368 or the schedule of debt.
That's determined by the amounts that you put in for your total gross revenues for 2019 and your total cost of goods sold for 2019. Those are the figures that will be used to determine the amount of your EIDL.
I have the application number starting with 3. How do I know any more documents I need to submit?
You will not know until you receive that email from the loan officer asking you to set up your EIDL portal and verify your identity. And then the other documents that will be in there will be the closing documents that need to be completed. So you won't know that before the loan officer reaches out to you.
Okay. COGS is not applicable for entities that do not sell a product. Should those entities put nothing in that box or operating expenses?
On the electronic application, there's a line there for cost of goods sold, but there is also a line there for cost of operations. So that's where they would put that figure, in the line for cost of operations.
It's hard to keep employees at this time. Do you think it's not a good idea to pay bonus or extra amount and keep employees on PPP? Can an employee have their hours increased?
Okay,
Same per hour, but just more hours than their average.
So with the PPP, it does not allow for bonuses, and the explanation that was given to us by our headquarters office is that the PPP program was not intended to be a windfall for the employer or for the employees. So if you choose to pay them more, then you need to understand that that amount may not necessarily be eligible for forgiveness. So you want to be careful about how you're using those funds, and keep in mind that the basis for approval for your loan amount was based upon the information that you submitted for payroll and for the number of employees that you had as of February 15, 2020. So if you choose to do that, please do that with the understanding that that amount may not be forgiven.
So in other words, when they were saying, even though they may be paying them the same per hour, but that mean they're just working more hours. The pay didn't change, but the amount of money that they're paying out does, and that portion may not be forgiven because that wasn't calculated in when they originally submitted their application for it.
Right. Yeah. And please understand also that we're relying upon the lenders to get whatever certifications are required, and also whatever documents are going to be required to support the request for forgiveness. And I understand that it may be kind of difficult right now with our not having developed that, as you're getting disbursements on your PPPs and you just need to know what to do. My best suggestion to you right now is just make sure that you do not go below what you normally pay them.
And the last part of that question is, must the nonprofits be 501c3?
Okay, there is 501c3, and then there's one, I think it's 501 C19 or something like that. Whatever it is specified in the interim final rule, and also I included in my presentation. So I'm going to look at, ask the next question, and I'm going to look real quickly to see if I could find that. And if I do, I'm going to type it in to the chat.
Okay.
Yeah, for the someone was looking for the site to go and apply for the EIDL if they had a number beginning with a 2, and I did type that in.
Okay. It's in the chat, so everybody should have access to be able to go look in the chat, and you'll see where she typed it in from herself. The other question that they have is, I failed to copy my application and therefore do not know my application number. Where can I go to find my number now?
There is no place that they can go to get their number, because right now there's not a portal that they can access. So if they applied under after March 30th, then that means that their number begins with a 3, and no worries, it's in the queue, and they'll be receiving something. They would have checked that they wanted to apply for the advance. If their number began with a 2, that just means that they did not have the opportunity to request the advance, and that's why we're giving them an opportunity to go back and apply and request the advance.
Okay. I am the owner of my business and I'm not on payroll. Is EIDL my only option for loan relief, or is PPP an option without payroll?
Okay, so for PPP for the sole proprietors, the amount for which you would be eligible for your salary is going to be determined by what you have on your Schedule C for 2019.
What are the allowable uses of the EIDL?
As EIDL, there's a little bit more flexibility in terms of the uses of proceeds. So you can use the funds to meet your current working capital needs, like paying those monthly expenses that you would otherwise be eligible to pay had this disaster not occurred. You can also use it to pay fixed debt, those monthly payments that you have to make. You can use it to pay the current portion of any long-term debts. You cannot use the funds for expansion or purchasing any new equipment. The purpose of the EIDL and those working capital loans is to meet your current expenses, nor can you use it to refinance any other debt or to pay off any other SBA loans that you may have.
Are commissions paid to salespeople considered bonuses and therefore not forgiven?
Okay, so commissions, that's one of the things that was included in the eligible payroll costs. So if it's something that was a normal practice or what you did and that was included in your application as a part of payroll, then yes, that's something that's included under payroll costs.
My company received a deposit for an advance for SBA loan. Does that mean the full SBA disaster loan is approved?
No, that just means that the EIDL advance has been approved and that your application is still needs to be processed.
I have the application confirmation number that starts with the number 3. How do I know any other documents I need to submit?
You won't know that until you receive the request from the loan officer to set up your, to create your EIDL portal, where you go in and verify your identity. So that's when you'll know that.
Okay. On PPP loan, if the owner of the business does not pay themselves through payroll and did not include their owner draw pay into the PPP loan that has already been dispersed, can they amend the PPP loan to include the owner's pay?
That information would have needed to been submitted with the original application. It should have been included in the payroll documents that were submitted. If they're not a sole proprietor or independent contractor or self-employed, that information would have been pulled either from their K1, line 14, minus any guaranteed payments, or from line, I think it's line 14, because what the lenders have to use is the information that's on lines 14 and line 31. So if that was not included, if it was not supported with the documents that you submitted, you cannot go back and amend that application.
I have a local flower shop that does not have employees and did not get to submit EIDL. What is available? And they say prom graduation and Mother's Day is their busy time, and they have been closed since March 3rd.
Okay, so did it say that they were a sole proprietor?
I guess this seems like it's a question of someone who's a consultant for the flower shop owner, and they're just looking to see what is available for them, because they did not get a chance to submit for the EIDL.
So if they received like 1099 from that flower shop, and so they were operating as a self-employed individual, and they have 1099s, and they file Schedule C with their 1040s, then if they show a profit on their Schedule C, then they would be eligible to apply for a PPP to cover their lost salaries, with the understanding that that profit that they show on Schedule C is going to be annualized. You know, in other words, whatever it would equate to over that 8-week period in salaries for a salary for themselves. So the self-employed, independent contractors, and sole proprietor, what dictates the amount for which they would be eligible is what's going to be reflected on their Schedule C. So if their Schedule C shows 0 or a net loss, then they would not be eligible for a PPP. For the EIDL, they would just have to wait to see if the portal opens back up for them to apply if they were a self-employed individual.
Okay. How will an independent contractor go about proving his or her own payroll, since he or she doesn't receive a paycheck from himself or herself?
The independent.
So go ahead.
Go ahead. You can
No,
finish.
you go ahead.
Okay, so the
you probably get
the amount for the amount for the independent contractors for which they would be eligible to apply will be determined by what's on their 2019 Schedule C. We recognize that they are not required to file their taxes until July 15th. However, when they submit their application for the PPP, they must complete their 2019 Schedule C. and their amount of salary or payroll is going to be determined by the net profit, and any expenses for which they're proposing to request forgiveness must be claimed as a deduction on their Schedule C.
This the continuation of this question, and it looks as though it's in the form of someone assisting someone with the loan and the processes and whatnot. Because they say one of my clients does residential remodeling and simply receives checks from non-business customers, and thus he does not receive 1099s either. So I guess that was a continuation of what you just answered.
Okay, so how do they report that income? Even though they're getting checks, how do they report that income on their taxes? That's what the key is. Are they reporting that income on their taxes? How do they report that? And then when they're reporting that income and claiming whatever expenses and all of that, their deductions, how is that reported on their taxes? The bottom line is what's going to be, and I believe it's line 31 on their tax returns. That's what's going to determine the amount for which they would be eligible to apply.
Okay. So they say, my clients and I are still waiting for our EIDL advance payments. Should we go ahead and start filling out the SBA disaster loan paperwork before we receive the EIDL advance, or will some other documentation be required?
Okay, so there's no paperwork that they have to complete at this time until they're requested to create their portal in the economic injury disaster loan portal and verify their identity. So there's no paperwork. If they wanted to prepare something in the event additional information may be requested, then they can prepare a schedule of liabilities and also a schedule of monthly income, just in case there's, in the event they determine that what's been approved for them in their full EIDL is not sufficient, then they have something that they can submit to the loan officer and say, hey, this is why this amount should be more than that. Here's my schedule of liabilities, and here's my schedule of monthly income.
Okay. My client didn't apply for the EIDL advance, and she is not an agricultural business. May she still apply for an EIDL disaster loan? Should she go ahead and send in the disaster loan paperwork in the SBA mailing to the SBA mailing address?
Only if she has or he has a confirmation number that begins with a 2, and they did not go back and complete the new electronic application and receive a confirmation number beginning with a 3. If they have a confirmation number beginning with a 3, there is nothing that they need to do. Submitting this paper application is only going to bog down the system and delay processing of all of the other applications that we already have.
Is the limit for EIDL now $150,000 instead of the maximum $2 million limit? They read this in the news today.
Yeah, that has not been sent down to the districts yet. So we can't say that that's what's in place, because that's not something that's been sent down to the field. We're aware that there was an article in the paper yesterday. However, that has not been sent down to the field yet.
Okay. Please define transportation under utilities.
So transportation includes the gas for company-owned vehicles. It does not cover transportation to and from work. It just covers gas for company-owned vehicles. And that is included in the interim final rule.
Will SBA open portal for new idle advance and loans, notwithstanding agricultural business?
Should we get additional financing? Yes, we will open the portal. Right now, we do not know if or when we will receive additional funding. And, you know, it's important to note that we can only do up to what, or lend up to what Congress approves of appropriations for the agency. So right now, the monies that have been approved for us, with more than 5 million applications, you know, it could already have been exhausted. We just don't know. So if we get more money from Congress, definitely we will reopen the portal.
Okay. What is the basis for calculating the amount of an idle advance a company receives?
The cost of goods, the total gross revenues and the cost of goods sold or cost of operations. And if it's a landlord who has lost rental income, then it would include that lost rental income. So that's the basis.
What if your payroll is larger than the funds received for PPP? Is this okay?
Yeah, that's fine. You mean when they're getting ready to request forgiveness? That's fine, as long as they're not going below that 75%.
Okay. If you use all PPP funds on salaries, can receipts of utilities paid sufficient to get advance forgiveness?
Wait, say that again?
If you use all PPP funds on salaries, can receipts of utilities paid suffice to get advance forgiven?
Okay. So on the idle advance, keep in mind we're talking about two separate things. So if you get the idle advance, that's going to be, and that idle advance comes after your PPP was approved. Okay, then that means that the amount of the idle advance is going to be deducted from the amount of forgiveness for your PPP. To forgive it on both ends, from the idle portal, idle program, and from the PPP program, would result in a duplication of benefits. So just know that if you had not received your idle prior to approval of your PPP, it happened afterwards, that amount's going to be deducted from the amount of forgiveness on your PPP. If you had received the idle prior to submitting your PPP, it's deducted on the front end.
Okay.
Okay, what's next?
I'm looking like it got moved a little bit.
Okay.
And I think you answered this one, but I don't want to not ask it. Please tell us what the idle funds may be used for. Can materials be paid for with this money?
Okay, so if that's a normal operating expense, something that you would normally have to purchase, like inventory or whatever, then yes. If it was a normal operating expense and a part of your working capital needs, then yes. But however, you cannot use it for purchasing additional equipment or for expansion. But if these are materials that's a normal course of your operation, then yes, you can.
Okay. If you submitted the streamlined application for advance and received the confirmation number starting with a 3 on March 30th, 2020, but have yet to receive it, does that mean you have been denied?
No, it does not. It just means that we haven't gotten around to processing your request for the EIDL advance.
What if you have an EIDL confirmation beginning with a 2 and a 3? Will these applications be merged?
Yes.
Okay. I'm looking at it, and I apologize for the delay, but I was in the chat just now, and I'm looking at the questions, and it looked like we've had a few go back to both of them. So I'm just making sure we're not duplicating.
Okay.
Yeah. I like that approach, though. I mean, they won't. So I'm going to go back. So follow up on bank holds. SBA reps telling me that the client app is good, and the only reason it's not being paid is because of a problem on the bank side. If you could please check, I guess they're asking, could you check when you return to the office? But you all don't have access to be able to check that. Is that correct, Ms. Joe?
Right. We can only see like if a loan has been approved. That's all we can see. When it comes to the disbursements of those loans, that's on the bank's end. SBA is not involved in that process.
Okay. When will the portal be open again to enter applications EIDL forgiveness advance grant for $10,000?
Not until we receive more funds from Congress.
If someone was awarded the EIDL, signed papers, but did not receive the $10,000 emergency sum, what should they do?
Right now, there's nothing that can be done because you cannot go back into the portal and reapply.
Is there any circumstance when a borrower should return the EIDL advance of $10,000 if it has not been funded? Example, if the borrower has been approved for and funded a PPP loan and the advance has been received after PPP funding.
The EIDL advance will be deducted from the amount of forgiveness since it occurred after the PPP was approved.
Okay. So let me make sure I say this before we go any further. I'm gonna apologize in advance if there seem as though some of this may sound redundant. As we receive the questions, obviously we don't know which ones are duplicate, and we want to respect everyone that took the time to submit their questions in. So if we're getting some of the same questions, some of the same answers, I'll apologize in advance. We're only doing it out of respect for those individuals that took the time to send them in. That's the reason why I was also making sure that I went and started going from the chat as well as some of the other questions that's being submitted in the question section of this of the webinar. So just wanted to make sure I cleared that up for you all as we go forward. When we receive an email about our loan, who will it come from, and what will the subject be?
It's going to come from an SBA loan officer with the Office of Disaster Assistance. So it will come from an SBA.gov email address. And in there there's going to be a reference to your confirmation number or loan number. And in that email, also in the body, you'll see it's going to be like a box, and there's a green link there that says create your account. And in the body of that, even before you click that link, it's going to have a reference to that confirmation number that that you received. So That's how you'll know. And I appreciate that question because there's so many scams out there. And I'm going to look in my email real quickly to see if I can find a email that I received yesterday from someone who had already gotten their portal link, to see if I could tell you. Okay, so in the subject line, it says SBA application number, and it's going to have that confirmation number that you received. And then when you get to the body of that, the letter or that email, is going to have that section in there where you actually click the link to set up your portal. It's looks like it comes from Disaster Customer Service at SBA.gov. SBA application number is going to give you that number, and it says submitted confirmation. And then the body of that email says create your economic injury disaster loan portal. And it says your SBA application number. Again, it repeats that confirmation number, is ready for the next step. Create your SBA Economic Disaster Loan Portal account to provide additional details or requested documents. So that's how you'll know it's from SBA. I'm looking at this from someone else who received it on the 6th from Disaster Customer Service at SBA.gov, and your application number is going to be in the subject line.
Can a recipient of the EIDL make payments before the deferment period? If so, where and how should the payments be sent?
Okay, if you have not received the payment coupon book yet, or payment coupon, I'm going to have to check on that, because you want to make sure that it's sent to the proper location, and that's going to be the Office of Disaster Assistance that's servicing your loan. So that's another question that I'll have to get clarification on from SBA. I mean, from the Office of Disaster Assistance.
I'm gonna see. I'm gonna read it how it is. How timbering business qualify under agricultural section?
Oh, I'll have to send that up. They're talking about those engaged in the timber. I'll have to send that one, because I have not seen that addressed exactly in those terms in the interim final rule that added the agribusinesses. So that's one I'll have to send up.
Okay. We are a small firm with 6 employees. We received PPP. Are there other loans for which we may qualify?
You may be eligible for an EIDL if you have additional working capital needs above payroll. You cannot use the funds for the same purposes. So your PPP is for payroll, utilities, rent, and mortgage interest payments. However, if you have if you apply for an EIDL, the EIDL does allow for payment of additional expenses and debt that you may have.
Is there a faster way to resolve banking issues with EIDL advance payments? I've been told the SBA will not pay the EIDL advance because the bank account belonged to John Q. Public, but the EIDL application was made for John Public.
So if there's a problem with the lender not releasing their PPP funds, it's, you know, that's, that'll be something that they'll have to work out with that lender, because that's why it's critical when you're completing these applications, and we stress, use the legal name under which that tax ID number was issued. So that'll have to be something that they'll have to work out with that lender. I don't know what additional verification the lender will need, but that's something they'll need to work out with the lender.
Okay. Is the PPP, in the PPP, is the calculation of gross or net?
I don't know what they're talking about when they say in the PPP is the calculation on gross or net. So there's a calculation on the total payroll amount that was paid for all of 2019 or for the past 12 months. So that's going to be the starting point. That's also the starting point for determining the number of employees. So if you're talking about the gross payroll, it's the gross payroll, not the net payroll.
Okay. Do we have a floor numeric number on credit score for the EIDL loan, such as below 600 for an applicant, but above 550?
Okay, so there is not the approval of the loan is not based solely on the credit score. Okay, so we're looking at your credit history. So in addition to pulling your credit report and you're looking at your credit score, we're also going to consider basically how well you pay your bills. If there is any recent delinquencies or derogatory information that's included on the credit report, and recent meaning things that occurred prior to January 31st, 2020. We also will check to see if there are any defaults on any federally guaranteed loans, if you're delinquent on your taxes. So there is not just credit score that we're reviewing. So there's no floor that's been given to us on the credit score.
I'm seeing a maximum of $150,000 EIDL loans from service-oriented companies, even though they have much larger revenue, great credit, and cash flow. Will they be able to apply for more?
Okay, so we're not aware that it's not been shared with us, I should say it that way, that there is a cap on the amount of the EIDL. I can only say that if there is a cap, that may be what they're using as an initial disbursement to ensure that as many applicants are serviced as possible, but that's not been given to us officially.
Can you use PPP funds to pay for past due payroll taxes?
No, you cannot.
What is the likelihood of a business that just opened in December receiving an EIDL loan?
As long as you were in operation as of January 31st, 2020, you would be eligible to apply for an EIDL. The amount of your EIDL is going to be determined by what your gross revenues were for 2019 and what your cost of goods sold or cost of operations were for that period. So you can apply, just know that your amount is going to be determined by what your revenues were for December 2019, if that's all that you have to report.
Okay. Is there any circumstances when a borrower should return the idle advance of $10,000 if it's been funded?
Wait, say that again?
Is there any circumstances, excuse me, is there any circumstances when a borrower should return the idle advance of $10,000 if it has been funded? Example,
No.
if the borrower has been approved for and funded a PPP loan and the advance has been received after PPP funding.
So what will happen, since the advance came after the PPP, that advance must be deducted from the amount of forgiveness that's requested. And the reason it has to be deducted is because that advance is subject to forgiveness. So we cannot have a duplication of benefits, since we will be forgiving or we may be forgiving the PPP.
When we receive an email about our loan, who will it? Oh no, you already answered that one, Sherry. Give me a second. My original understanding was the loss rents up to $10,000 were to be forgiven as a grant. True or not? I don't understand that question, how they have it worded. Hopefully you do, Miss Joe.
Okay, so they're speaking of the idle advance. They're using the term grant. I cannot use the term grant, okay?
Correct.
All I use is that the idle advance is subject to forgiveness.
I was turned down for payroll protection with no explanation. It was only for $1,800.
Okay, so that would be a matter that they would have to take up with the lender. So if they were denied, the lender should have given them an explanation of why they were denied. Because that means SBA didn't even see the loan if they denied them.
My business was established July 28, 2019. I do not have previous 12 months income, loss, and profit. Do I just include the 5 months of operation and the application averages into an annual figure?
Yes, so what they'll do is use the figures from the period for which they were in operation. So in determining payroll, they can go back from February 1st, okay, back to when they started in 2019, because they have the option of using payroll for all of 2019 or a period, another 12-month period. So right now they haven't been in business for 12 months. So that means that they're going to go back from February 1st, 2020 to when they started in 2019 to calculate what their payroll was for that period and the number of employees.
Okay. Will the 8-week period following loan funding be extended for those companies who are unable to reopen and hire employees back due to government mandates?
No, the 8 weeks period starts on the date of disbursement of those funds when you first receive them, and you must return the employees to payroll on that date. You cannot hold the funds and wait until you reopen, because the purpose of the PPP is to return those employees to payroll. That's why you applied for it, because you want to return the folk to payroll. You want to pay them. If you are not going to comply with that, then you either choose to not request forgiveness or return the loan. But you cannot hold the funds until you decide to open or the state says you can open. You have to return those employees to payroll immediately upon disbursement. And all of the funds, all of the funds, yeah, all of the funds have to be used within that 8-week period. You cannot go beyond that 8-week period.
So this kind of rolls into this other question, and will the PPP loan cover or allow for payroll that was maintained prior to the insurance of PPP loan? Example, employees sent home during government mandatory close period, yet business continue to pay employees to help them out during this time and not laid off.
Okay, so the PPP is only going to cover from the date of disbursement of the PPP and those 8 weeks. It's not intended to go back to allow you to recoup funds that you already expended. The intent is to continue to pay those employees from the date that you received the PPP funding. And that's the only period that's going to be considered when the request for forgiveness is submitted. It's going to go from the date of disbursement and what was paid from that time up to that 8 weeks.
As a sole entrepreneur with an LLC in operation 6 months before COVID, and I applied and got a confirmed number with a 3. I only made $8,000. Am I still eligible?
Yeah, you were eligible as long as you were in operation as of January 31st, 2020. You were eligible to apply for the. Was this for EIDL or PPP?
This was for.
If it's for EIDL, you had to have been in operation as of January 31st, 2020. For PPP, you must have been operational as of February 15th, 2020. So yeah, you would be eligible to apply.
Okay. I'm just looking, Ms. Joe, because you just answered in those last few questions, it was pretty similar to the other ones. What guarantee percentage is offered to the issuing bank on the bridge loan program?
Oh, for the guarantee is 50% on the express loans.
How do you find out which lenders can provide the express loan?
You have to work.
The express bridge loan.
Yeah, you have to work with your lender. One of the requirements for the Express Bridge Loan Pilot Program is that you must have a business relationship with your lender, whatever lender you are approaching. So that's different from the PPP, where, you know, even though you're encouraged to work with your bank of account or lender of account, if they're unable to do it, you can work with another lender. But for the Express Bridge Loan Pilot Program, this has to be your regular lender who is a participant in the Express Loan Pilot Program.
Does PPP take into account that the former employees who are now receiving $847 per week?
So what you have to do in order to be eligible for forgiveness, you have to make a good faith effort in hiring those employees. And a good faith effort means that you offer them the job in writing, and then if they deny it, if they say they're not coming back, you have to document that. And then you have to report that to the unemployment office. And then you can go on and hire someone else to replace that employee.
Can I use idle loan to petition off work area to keep clients safe?
That's not a part of the working capital eligibility requirements.
If I'm not allowed to open, can I pay employees within the 8-week period, even though they are not working, just to meet the loan forgiveness rule?
Yeah, that's what the intent of the program is. Yes, to pay them even though they are not working.
As the PPP, do the funds need to be repaid if they are used for payroll past the 8 weeks?
Those funds will not be forgiven if they are not used within the 8 weeks. You have to use those funds within the 8 weeks. If not, that portion that's not used will not be forgiven. It will be termed out to 2 years.
They say this is coming, I guess someone that attended the webinar. You mentioned that PPP still has funds unallocated and is therefore available. However, the banks locally are stating that they are no longer accepting applications. Where should I go to apply for the PPP?
You can search in the on the lender, find a lender tool for to find a lender. So even though some of the banks may no longer be participating, you still have credit unions and CDFIs who are participating in the PPP. So I would suggest contacting one of them.
When we applied for the PPP loan, we were asked to give the number of our full-time employees. If we use the correct amount of payroll costs based on our loan, can the number of employees be both part-time and full-time? In other words, can the total number of employees be varied based on part-time and full-time employees?
So when SBA looks at the number of employees, it does take into consideration full-time and part-time employees. You just need to ensure that for those employees you had on payroll at the time you applied for the loan, that you're not reducing their salary or their wages.
Is the 6-month deferral 6 months from the loan funding date? Is the 6-month deferral 6 months from the loan funding date, or is it January 1st, 2021?
The 6 months is 6 months from the disbursement date. That's the date that it starts.
This one is asking more of the taxation of the PPP forgivable amount. So they're asking, can you discuss a bit about the taxation of the PPP forgivable amount and the non-deductibility of the forgivable expense?
Those are IRS guidelines and not SBA's guidelines. So you'll have to work with your CPA or whoever does your taxes regarding that. IRS has come out and said that on the PPP loan, that those expenses that you're claiming that will be forgiven, that you cannot count those as deductions on your taxes. You also need to know that with those amounts that's forgiven, you want to work with your CPA to see what's going to be taxable and what will not be taxable based upon IRS guidelines. Those are not SBA's guidelines. Those are IRS guidelines. So you'll need to work with your CPA on that.
Can you use accrued payroll as part of the forgiveness calculation, or do the wages have to be paid prior to the end of the 8-week period?
The wages must be paid prior to the end of the 8-week period. That's been a question that's come up, whereas say the pay date may fall after the 8-week period. However, you know, SBA's guidance right now that's in place is that all of the funds have to be expended within that 8-week period. And I should say SBA's and Treasury's guidance.
If you receive 1,000 of EIDL advance and receive PPP funds of $2,000, is only 1,000 eligible for forgiveness? Also, does it mean that the 75% of payroll threshold is based on the 1,000 or the 2,000?
It's based on the 2,000 and not the 1,000. And the reason that 1,000 EIDL advance has to be deducted is because it's subject to forgiveness. So we can't forgive it on both ends.
Okay. This one, it says, for decades, 3 to 4 2-week pay bonuses per year have been a part of our employees' pay, and our lender used these bonuses to figure our loan amounts for PPP loans. Can we use the PPP loan account to pay the 2-week pay bonuses that is due to keep our employees from having a pay decrease? Without the PPP money, we haven't the funds to pay.
Okay, so if that was something that was a normal course of operations and the lender allowed that in your calculation, then yes. It's just that for anyone where that was not used and they're proposing to use that a bonus to try to come up to the 75%, that is what is not allowed. However, if bonuses was a normal course of operation, they were able to support that in what they submitted to the lender, and the lender included that in the calculation, then the answer is yes.
Okay. I'm coming in. Once again, I apologize. Anytime, I apologize for the delay in between questions. But what I recognize is that we have individuals that have submitted questions, but also are asking the questions either via the question and answer section here or in the chat. So I'm trying to just go through them to make sure that we get to questions that have not already been answered. So just just bear with me a few minutes.
Okay, that's fine.
Let me see. We were approved and received the EIDL. The funds were helped, but not nearly enough. Can we get an increase?
Okay.
Is there another option for loans available? Go ahead.
Okay, so right now there's not another option for loans available other than if they're going to apply for a PPP and be eligible for that. Prior to our receiving so many applications, there was a provision in there to apply for an increase. Right now, because of the volume of applications that we've received, that's no longer an option. It may become available later on if we're successful in getting additional financing, but for right now, that's not an option to request an increase.
How does a Schedule C filer with no employees qualify for forgiveness of the PPP? Do they just write themselves a check? I noticed that the number of employees before and after matters. What if a new business went through 8 people in January and February, but after receiving PPP found 4 permanent employees? And does the owner, Schedule C, themselves as an employee.
Okay, so for the Schedule C filers, the self-employed individuals, the amount for which the owner will be entitled is going to be based upon what's on line 31, because that's what they're reporting as their income, unless they ran their salary through payroll like they ran the salary of the other employees that they had. So they must have run their salary through payroll the same way they ran their employees' payroll through salary. And that then they would need to be able to support that with the documents that they submit to the lender, and the lender will use that as a part of their calculation. Apart from that, as far as what it is to which the owners would be entitled is going to be based upon what's reported on their Schedule C.
So, let's see. What is the best way to pay utilities for 25% if those expenses are paid through credit card? Do I pay my credit card and then reimburse myself? I'm an independent contractor working from home, no employees.
You need to be able to document that those expenses were paid, however it is that you pay them. You have to be able to document how you paid those expenses.
Our nonprofit received PPP. We paid April and May salaries. It saved us from having to let a person go. We're basically going through May, but from June 1st, we will be on a tightrope again. Can we apply for EIDL and pay expenses and payroll for June plus?
So after their PPP, they expend all of their PPP money. Yes, they can apply for an EIDL loan. Yeah.
Just have to understand that that's not going to be forgiven, though.
Correct. That's the 30-year loan.
Using an EIDL. That's correct.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and with the understanding that if that EIDL portal is open again,
right,
you still need to keep that in mind. Yeah.
I'm just going through the questions to get some, I guess, some newer ones.
Okay.
Can owners that receive owner's draw before PPP be placed on payroll if they begin drawing a taxed check?
Depends upon how you submitted your application to the lender, and if at the time you submitted your application to the lender, you included yourself in payroll and the lender accepted that. So it depends upon how you apply.
Okay. Can one pay their office rent bill that was incurred prior to the approval of their EIDL as a legitimate office expense with the $3,000 advance? I have not paid my rent for months of April and May, both due the first of each month. SBA EIDL advance was received on May 1st, 2020. Our employee PPP loan was dispersed 5/6/2020. Or can I use the 25% rule with the PPP loan and pay the month of April, even though the PPP was effective May 6th?
Okay, you cannot use the PPP to go backwards. That has to cover those expenses and payroll that come due after that disbursement is made. So if the disbursement was made on May 6th, then you can use your PPP to pay whatever rent or leases were due after that time. But it's not intended to go backwards. If you want to use your idle funds, because that is a working capital loan to pay your rent, and rents are an eligible expense, then you can use it for that.
Okay. Still part of the same question. Can one purchase new equipment as an operating expense under the idle loan? This equipment would minimize the doctor/staff exposure to the patient while performing an eye exam.
That's not an eligible use of proceeds for the idle. It does not include purchasing equipment.
Okay. When I received my PPP disbursement on 5/6/20, it falls midpoint in the first 2 weeks of a payroll period. Our employees are returning to work on 5/11. So do I start counting the week of 5/10 to 5/16 as the first week or of our 8 weeks? Does that mean our 8 weeks of payroll would end the week of 6/28 to 7/5, or does our 8 weeks end on 6/30 regardless of payroll period overlap?
So those employees have to be returned to payroll effective May 6th, the date that you receive the disbursement. That means that you have to pay them from May 6th going forward. You cannot delay paying them or start paying them on May 10th because you received the money prior to May 10th. So they have to be paid from May 6th going forward. And however your payroll cycle runs, that's how you're going to pay them. However, it must include May 6th. And your 8 weeks period for using the funds will end 8 weeks from May 6th.
Okay. Can PPP funds be used to cover overtime because demand of services increased during this period?
Okay, so if demand or services increase, then you need to examine your need for the loan. So if there's been an increase in what it is and you're receiving, income as a result of that, then that means you need to re-examine your need for the loan.
This says, I applied for an idle advance. My application started with a 3. I received a loan of $6,800, but did not receive the advance. Then I talked to someone. They told me that it is not uncommon to receive the loan first and that I should still receive the advance of $5,000 since I had 5 employees. And can you shed some light on this situation?
Yeah, and that's correct. So it just means, so we have like the disbursement center out of Dallas that's making disbursements. There are personnel, both in Dallas and Citrus Heights that are processing the loans. So it's possible that you received your your loan prior to getting your advance, but the records will show that you did not receive the advance. So you're still in the loop to receive that advance.
Is the deadline to return PPP funds, if not needed anymore, May 14th?
Yes. And we call that the safe harbor period, where those who determine they no longer need the PPP loans, they have until May 14th to return those funds, and SBA and the Treasury Department will consider them to have made their certifications in good faith.
I have employees that I had to lay off when our business income declined due to COVID. They have taken other jobs and are not coming back. Is it okay if I replace them according to PPP policy for repayment if I hire replacement people?
Yes, you can replace those employees.
I was a minister of music, 1099 employee of a local church who lost her job on April 6, 2020. I filled out the SBA forms on just the word of others with no real knowledge of what to do. I feel like I made mistakes on my application. I wish this webinar was available a month ago. Should I have filed for PPP as an independent contractor? And other part of that, will I have an opportunity to change anything once an agent contacts me?
So on the EIDL, if there were errors, and this was a question that came up, and I don't know if those individuals are on the phone, but this was a question that came up when we did the webinar. Okay, so first, in response to, I wish this webinar had been done a month ago. I've been doing webinars since March 23rd, and as of last week, April 28th or 29th, I had done over 50 webinars. In some cases, we were doing 2 and 3 a day, and we were doing them every day. So we had webinars going on. It's just unfortunate that you were not aware, because they were all posted on our website. That's why we're encouraging everyone to sign up for SBA updates. Now, with respect to errors and omissions on the EIDL application, what we've been advised to have those applicants do is to send a communication to the disbursement center in Fort Worth at the Kingsport Road address, to send a communication to them with their confirmation number, notifying them of the error that they made on their application. Like someone mentioned, they put in the wrong bank account. Someone else mentioned that they put in an incorrect email address. So the only remedy that we have for that right now is to send communication to the Kingsport Road address in Fort Worth and notify them of the errors that were made. Now, as it relates to the application, I'm not sure what errors may have been made on your application, but you want to specify what those are, and ask that they be corrected. So that's what has to happen. You have to send a written communication to the Kingsport Road address, to the disbursement center in Fort Worth, Texas.
Okay. We just have a few more.
Wait.
Go ahead, Ms.
He also asked about PPP. So for the PPP, as an independent contractor, you will need to complete your Schedule C to your 1040 for 2019. And in determining the amount for which you would be eligible as a self-employed individual, the lenders will use what's on line 31 from your 2019 taxes.
Okay.
So I hope that helps.
Payments to employees are twice a month. To maintain PPP requirement of 7 weeks payments to employees, do I need to change to weekly payments to employees versus twice a month?
No, you don't have to change. And it's 8 weeks, not 7. It's just that you cannot request forgiveness until after the end of the 7th week. So you have to pay those employees for 8 weeks, okay? And you just need to make sure that the period for which you are paying them starts with the date of disbursement, and that you expend all of the funds prior to the end of the 8 weeks. So I've been typing some things into the chat, and I'm not sure if they're able to see those. Like I put the website in there where individuals will go to apply if they have a number that begins with a 2. So I'm getting ready to type in the address for the Processing and Disbursement Center in Fort Worth on Kingsport Road. So I'm trusting that everyone is able to see that.
Okay.
You can go ahead, Kenyatta. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, you good, Ms. Joe.
Okay, all right.
I'm a 1099 self-contract freight driver. Did I hear you say that my fuel costs for delivery, not commutes, would be considered as utility costs subject to forgiveness in a PPP loan?
Yeah. So the gas, the fuel costs, for if that's a company-owned vehicle, the fuel cost for company-owned vehicles is what is included for transportation. And that is in the interim final rule.
Okay.
I'm listening. I'm just typing. I have to scroll back and forth
I understand.
to see the full address, because I'm doing that part from my phone, and I don't want to risk like toggling back and forth between the screen and the chat, because sometimes it disconnects me. But I'm listening.
Okay. I renovated my home last year to operate an Airbnb as a sole proprietor business in the last 3 months of 2019. I have no employees, but I used the funds as wages earned because I was not in business in the early part of the year from February 15, 2019 to June 2019. As the Act mentions in PowerPoint slide, in the slide that we had, I used the Act rule to determine monthly wages of January 1st to February 29th, 2020, as the Act clearly spells out. I provided proof of those wage earnings through copies of my bank statements, which showed automatic deposit payments from Airbnb during those 2 months. However, my banking institution says I do not qualify because my 2019 tax return reported in the Schedule E as rents received in the amount of $2404, and in the same Schedule E report expenses of $7,681, and it breaks down the repairs. Because the loss was reported on Schedule E and not Schedule C as mentioned on. So I don't know what their question is. I guess they're just seeking for guidance.
Well, what it is she's showing that she did not have a net income. So if she's showing a loss, that's what's making her ineligible. So even though I referred to Schedule C, it also refers to Schedule E. So if you're showing a net loss, then you're saying to us that you had no income. And that's why the lender has determined that you're ineligible for a PPP, and they're only following the guidance that's in the interim final rule and the frequently asked questions. So that's why you were determined ineligible, because you said to us that you had no income.
Okay. right, Ms. Bishop, look like we wrapping it up, man, because you really, unless I'm going to see, they got something else that came in. Let me see. Can I apply for the EIDL loan if I'm an Uber or Lyft driver since we are independent contractors?
Yes, you can. As long as you were in operation as of January 31st, 2020.
Okay. Well, yep. And once again, I apologize, folks. I'm just going through all of the questions that were submitted because I see that there was a lot of questions that were submitted that was also placed in the chat. And then we also had various numbers that were also submitted on yesterday. So unless anyone has any other questions that they need to have addressed, the time would be now. So I guess I can say this. If you submitted your question on yesterday and you had not heard a response to it, please take the time now because we got a few more minutes with Ms. Joe. And that way we can go ahead and address it. So take the time now to go ahead and submit it in either or, not both, in either the questionnaire section or in the chat. So we can go ahead and address it now.
So
we got two more. Go ahead, Ms. Joe.
I see something here. Someone is asking, can PPP funds be used to pay for 1099 contractors for services rendered? You cannot use PPP funds to pay independent contractors because independent contractors can apply on their own. Can maturing loans be paid with the EIDL? No, you cannot pay off a loan with the EIDL funds. That's a prohibited use of the proceeds. What are the rules regarding a second job? You know, that's not something that comes under SBA's purview. That if you decide to do that, that's on you. So what do banks need to do to receive the fees related to the processing of the PPP? That's guidance that we're still developing. And so that that guidance will be coming out. Payroll taxes are a part of your payroll amount. You cannot use the PPP to pay FICA, but you can use it to pay the state and the local taxes. So Kenyatta, unfortunately, because I have to jump off and get on another call in just a few minutes, and we devote over 2 hours. If there are any other questions that come in that we did not address, just send them to me and I'll prepare written responses. But it looks like we covered just about everything except for what people are putting in now.
Okay.
Yeah. So whatever, you know, is coming in now, you know, just send them to me, but I'm gonna have to jump off because I gotta get prepared for this other call in just a few minutes. But I appreciate your time and everyone's time. We gave them 2 hours. So that's longer than what we had expected. You know, we had anticipated that, and we've gone well beyond that. So I trust this information was helpful for everyone, and we just appreciate their patience with us and their time and attendance in this Q&A session. As more guidance is developed, you know, we'll see that there's a need to conduct another session, and we'll be happy to do it, either as a webinar
Absolutely.
or as a Q&A. We just need to know what's going to be the best for them. So if they deem that this was beneficial, where they were able to send questions in and we answer those questions, that's fine. Or if they need a full webinar or a combination of the two, just let us know. We're willing to do whatever is going to be beneficial to them. So thank you so much, Kenyatta. I just got about 5 minutes to get ready.
Good, Ms. Jo. Man, I appreciate you, Ms. Jo. Thank you so much for taking the time to do it. And like you say, I'll gather any additional questions and make sure we can address those. And I appreciate your time, Ms. Jo. So I know you got to go. I know you got to get ready for the other one. Like you said, you've done over 50 so far over the last few months, and they're back to back. So listen, we definitely appreciate it. We know we extended a little bit longer than what we expected, but I'm happy that we were able to do it because I know how these times are for a lot of the small businesses. So I appreciate it, Ms. Jo. You have a good day.
You too, and
a great weekend.
Enjoy the weekend.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, take care.
You too.
Okay.
So,
bye-bye.
Okay, Ms. Jo.
All right.
Yeah. All right. As we conclude, as you heard Ms. Jo say, she'll be more than happy to address any questions, either in written form, but also if we have to, we'll revisit and possibly do another webinar if there's any updates, or to just address any other questions and concerns. I think this platform is welcome because it gives you an opportunity to speak to someone directly. Because I know if you like me, I hate dealing with automated services. So when you can get someone to talk to, obviously that relieves a lot of stress and frustration, because hopefully you can get the information that you're seeking or the answers to the questions that you have. So I, again, appreciate your time. I do want to say this again, with my firm, SJB Group, we have a contract with DOTD for disadvantaged business enterprise. We help facilitate that program for them by way of DBE supported services. Please visit our site, our website. If you're already certified, great. If you're not certified, please feel free to give me a call. I'll be more than happy to help you through that process of getting certified. And for all certified firms that know me, I appreciate y'all for coming on. The ones who are going to get a chance to know me, I look forward to that. Here's the for our website. It's www.louisianadbe, that's D as in dog, B as in boy, E as in Eric.com. Please take your time to visit the site. That site is strictly set there for DB supported services for our region. And obviously we'll continue to populate it with valuable information. These webinars, as well as other future webinars, will be listed on there as well. Once we complete our editing, we will have them available, and obviously you can sign up to it as well to get any notifications that way. So once again, I appreciate your time. I hope that this was beneficial, helpful to you all. And any other questions that we receive, we will be sure to get that to you in a timely fashion. You all have a great rest of your day. Have a great weekend. Stay safe. And you have my email. If not, I'll get that to you once again. It's Kenyatta, KENYATTA.Sparks, SPARKS, at S as in Sam, J as in Jack, B as in boy, group.com. My direct line to my office is 225-706-5756. Once again, that's 225-706-5756. Feel free to email me or call me with any questions or concerns that you may have, and I will do my best to address those in a timely fashion. Thank you all again, and this is the conclusion of our webinar for today.